I was warming soup in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. It was almost 9 in the evening, unusually late for visitors. Through the window, I saw two men in dark clothing standing at my door. One of them was holding something. My hands suddenly felt cold. I opened the door slowly. They showed me police badges and asked if I was Mara Jones. My heart sank even before they explained why they were there. They were looking for my husband, Daniel. I told them he was upstairs, and they went to get him. 10 minutes later, they came down with Daniel. He wasn't handcuffed, but his face was unnaturally calm. He looked at me but said nothing. I asked where they were taking him, and one officer said they just had some questions. But I knew in my bones he wouldn't be coming back soon. I watched from the window as they drove away. The soup burned on the stove, filling the house with a bitter smell. I sat at the kitchen table with shaking hands, trying to understand what had just happened. Daniel and I had been married for 5 years. We met through mutual friends and built what I thought was a simple, happy life. He was quiet and thoughtful, always kind to me. He worked in logistics, or so he said, managing shipments and traveling to nearby cities. I never questioned him much because I trusted him completely. He remembered our anniversaries, brought me flowers without reason, and made tea when I was tired. I believed we were safe together. That night I couldn't sleep. In the morning, I called the police station. They said Daniel was being held but wouldn't tell me why. I was allowed to visit in the afternoon. When I arrived, they led me to a small room divided by glass. Daniel sat on the other side, looking exhausted. We picked up the phones. He spoke first, saying he was sorry. I asked him what he was sorry for, and he told me he hadn't been honest. He said he wasn't really working in logistics. He had been moving stolen goods, expensive electronics and jewelry. He got involved years before we met, needing money at first, then finding it too easy to stop. I asked why he never told me, and he said he knew I would leave him. He said he loved me, and that was never a lie. I hung up the phone and walked out without looking back. At home, I opened the drawer in his office that he always kept locked. The key was in his coat pocket. Inside, I found papers, foreign currency, photographs of strangers, and bank cards with other names. I didn't understand everything, but I understood enough. The life I thought we shared wasn't real. I sat on the floor, surrounded by his secrets, feeling a deep disappointment worse than anger. He had stolen more than objects. He had stolen my trust, my peace, and my entire story. Over the following days, police officers returned with more questions. They showed me items Daniel had hidden in our garage that I never knew existed. Neighbors began to avoid me or look at me with pity. I kept going to work because routine helped me think, but at home I felt lost. Every room reminded me of a lie. I searched my memory for warning signs, but found none. He had been careful, skilled at hiding his other life. Then I found a letter he had written to me, hidden in a drawer. It was short and cold, saying only that if I was reading it, he couldn't protect me from the truth anymore. There was no real goodbye, no explanation. A week later, I met with a lawyer who told me Daniel could face 10 years or more in prison. The police had found documents, photos, and messages, some in our home. I told the lawyer I knew nothing, and he believed me, but his advice was clear. Stay quiet and don't speak to anyone without him present. At work, people whispered about me. One woman said loudly that she would never live with a man like that. I left early that day and didn't return. I visited Daniel one more time. He looked thinner and worn down. I asked him if our marriage had been part of his plan, if he had used me. He said no, that I was never part of the criminal world, that our love was real. I wanted to believe him, but my heart no longer knew what was true. When the court sentenced him to 12 years in prison, I read about it online. I didn't cry or feel relief. I simply closed my laptop and went outside. The air felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had finally lifted. Healing took time. I stayed with my sister Eliza for a while, and she helped me process everything without judgment. I started therapy, which taught me that loving someone doesn't mean you knew all their secrets. Slowly, I began building a new life. I found a new job, moved into a small apartment, and joined a book club. I started volunteering at a women's shelter where I met Lena, another woman who understood betrayal. She became a true friend, someone who accepted me without demanding explanations. One Sunday in the park, Lena asked if I thought I would ever trust again. I thought carefully and told her I wanted to, but not yet. She nodded and said trust doesn't have to come quickly. Her words reminded me that healing happens at its own pace. I didn't have to rush into anything. I had lost the man I thought I knew, but I had found something more important. I had found myself again, standing on my own, no longer defined by someone else's lies. The woman who once froze in fear when the doorbell rang was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who knew that even after the deepest betrayal, it was possible to begin again.